In this video, we dive into the creative world of Lawrence Yeo, the writer and artist behind one of my favorite newsletters, More to That. We discuss the nuances of the human condition and the power of creativity, introspection, and self discovery. Lawrence also shares his insights around the challenges of navigating self doubt, envy, and self publishing. I just read his book, The Inner Compass. It's an excellent read, short, practical, personal, great illustrations. I think it's relevant to anyone grappling between deep personal intuition and powerful, invisible social scripts, narratives, and expectations. Let's dive in. You mentioned you probably couldn't write this book now. Where were you when you started working on this project? What was the context in your life that this sprung out of?
Yeah, so last year I was in a pretty deep period of doubt just as to where things were going, what am I doing in my creative life, and I guess a little bit of brief context is that I was thinking about a book project and was in talks with a publisher to work on a book about money, but that didn't really seem to be the right project at the time. And I was like, well, if I don't work on this book, then where do I want to take things next? And, I've been writing on the internet for, I don't know, about like 6, 7 years now with More to That. And I think that I just wanted to have a different kind of container, really, to put some of my thoughts and ideas in. And I thought it was going to be a book, but it didn't seem like that was the route. And it was around that time where when I'm in these periods of doubt, then sometimes I feel like just making my way through it isn't quite the answer all the time. So I was reading a lot of different stuff. One great book I came across was this book called Don't Believe Everything You Think by Joseph Nguyen. And it was a short book. And it talks a lot about various thought patterns and thinking patterns and so forth. But the one thing I took away from it was, okay, there is this thing we call our intuition, and how am I using my intuition, and is mine properly calibrated? I felt like I've kind of just been doing things where I feel like I should be doing, like should write a book on money because my work has been popular there. And instead of my attention kind of directed to, well, what do I want to do right now, really? And at that moment, I knew that, hey, this very doubt that I'm feeling, this feeling like I should be doing something, when in reality, I want to look somewhere else, that feeling must be felt by countless other people. Not in the context of writing a book or creative work, but just this feeling that you should do something, and how that feeling that you need to be doing something other than what you are is the root cause of a lot of suffering that we feel in our lives. And I kind of had a light bulb moment. Oh, shoot. And I kind of realized that a lot of stuff that I already write about, whether it's money, whether it's death, whether it's creativity, they're all kind of linked to this notion of what it means to understand yourself through these various avenues. So I thought, well, I'll just write a book about that, about understanding yourself. And it kind of just kicked off from there. And yeah, that was the genesis of it. And funnily enough, I am going to be writing a book on money next, because the timing works. I think, you know, there are certain seasons in one's life for various topics, and the Inner Compass was the right season during that time last year for me.
I think in the intro you write an earlier version of myself would have benefited from this book's existence. If have you run the thought experiment of what if Lawrence 5 years ago read this or 10 years ago read this? What how would life look different? What different choices do you think you might have made?
Hmm. Well, I think the earlier version of myself, like especially in my 20s, it was really driven off of what other people are doing. And there was this attachment really that I had to that. And that if I wasn't satisfying a particular expectation or not being what I thought I should be doing, whether it's the line of work I'm in or whether it's the way I show up for people, like, hey, I'm supposed to be this kind of person with that person and so forth. Like a lot of my behaviors were kind of shaped from a lot of these expectations. And they weren't always like someone saying you need to do this. It was always just my own voice, my critic, inner critic, if you will, saying that, hey, you have to emulate this behavior or mold yourself according to this preference and so forth. And that really seemed to take me to places where I just didn't really know who I was. And this was particularly salient when I tried to do music, because I pursued music professionally for a few years. And rather than just focus just kind of on the intrinsic nature of the craft and getting better at that, I realized that I was just tying myself to people that I like normally wouldn't hang out with if it weren't for me thinking like, oh, if I tie myself to this person, my music could go somewhere. So all that kind of combined to be like, I think that's the Lawrence I would give this book to. And in a way, like, I think we all go through that stage. I mean, it's kind of a prerequisite of sorts, right? And it's kind of baked into us. I talk in this book about this concept called social referencing, where when we are babies, we use our mother's emotional state to navigate the physical world. Like, that's wild. So if a baby's gonna crawling around, sees a little sofa drop, he will look to his mom and see what she looks like. If she's calm, he's going to be calm. If she's anxious, he's going to be anxious. So it's baked into us to look outward to validate our sense of safety. So I think ultimately, though, what education does, like real education, the function of education is that you're not in this state for too long to kind of break that correlation between age and wisdom, that even when you're younger, you can still find your way out of that and have more trust in yourself, and shortcut that. And I think this book would have helped that earlier version of Lawrence. At the same time, though, it's kind of like, well, maybe earlier version of Lawrence just had to go through all that to get to this book in the first place. So, there's a kind of paradox there.
What's the difference between a short book and a long blog post? How do you think about kind of the structure and the format changing your process or your thinking about how to create that thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, so the inner compass is, I think, about like 18,000 words. I have written blog posts at around 18,000, 20,000 words. So now, well, what makes the difference between the two? And this is what I was talking earlier about containers, right? Like, it matters what shape your work takes in terms of knowing the intentionality you're going to put into it and also presenting its significance to others. So it's funny because like when I announced this book, people were like, congratulations. And I was like, you've never congratulated me for writing a blog post that's just as long. But there is this sense from the other side that, oh, like a book carries some sort of cultural significance, and there is some sort of, like, oh, this person put a lot of energy into it, right? And that is also true. So from the point of the creator, when you know that you're going to write a book, there is this intentionality that you put into it, right? And some of this is linked to the fact that there is a fiscal cost for a book. Like this is, I think it was Seth Godin who said something like, when you write a book and you present it to the public, you're implicit in that is saying, for this, you're gonna have to pay. And implicit in that is like, okay, well, as the author, knowing that not just is there a fiscal cost, but also attentional cost, the reader's gonna have to devote their time with this thing. You want to bring the best of your abilities to this project. So knowing that you're going to write a book, like sometimes that could be really scary though because of these expectations and so forth. But a lot of it is also you just think that there's a topic that you feel like is so important where you want to dedicate an inordinate amount of effort to doing it. And whatever that is going to take the shape of a book.
Why do you think it takes so much time and energy and effort to make something so short?
Yeah, it's kind of like that Blaise Pascal quote, right? I mean, it's commonly misattributed to Mark Twain, but it's like if I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter. And I think that, compression is hard, and it's really easy to have a bunch of information and to just take like your note-taking system and then be like, all right, like I have all this information here, and you just present that. That's really easy. What's hard is to take all that and distill it and then also imbue your own personal insight and perspective into it. I think the issue is that there's always this kind of asymmetry of information where it's like, I know a lot more about this particular topic because it's my own life than you do. So you kind of just sometimes you forget the fact that the other person doesn't have your lived experience, and you include all these details that are like not really necessary and so forth. Um, I think, yeah, when you're optimizing for brevity, you are kind of valuing people's attention, right? And I think knowing that you value the other side's attention makes you be a little bit more economical with your work. And the very first line in the book is, as a service to your attention, this book is short. It's me setting the stage that, hey, I'm not here to waste your time. I want to get straight into things, but this is not going to just be an information dump. It's not going to just be me transferring knowledge to you, because just use AI for that. Like for this, you're going to get what I refer to as close to possible as understanding, right? Not knowledge. Knowledge is just information, and understanding is experience. So I'm going to take a lot of what I've experienced, wrap it around here, put that's the wrapper around the knowledge, and then deliver that. But I'm going to respect your attention and not overstay my welcome in a sense. So I had that intention from the beginning of this book.
You've written some personal stuff on the blog and newsletter previously, but this seems like kind of a new level of personal. Talk about that
Yeah.
experience of kind of figuring out the big concept and then kind of the personal narrative piece.
Yeah, so I in this book I talk a lot about mental health struggles that I've had in the past. I talk about current physical conditions that I'm navigating, and this is one of those things too. Going back to the book, is that like sometimes it feels like things in your life are not ready to be expressed until the right vessel arrives to transport it. And I felt like, you know, like my history, my depression, my past depression was like over a decade ago, more than that. But I hadn't really written about it on more than that. And it felt like when this book was here, this idea of, well, what does it mean to understand yourself and to know yourself? Like when that container presented itself, I was like, I think this is the time to take that experience and put it in here, because it just acts as a nice building block to it. And also it allows me to like process it a little bit more, right? Like what exactly did I feel so down about? And the chapter where I introduce it, I say, depression isn't feeling down when things are going badly. It's feeling down when things are going well. And I feel like that is it's a modern ailment where physically we're all good, we're okay, we're taken care of, but mentally we're in this extreme distress and suffering. And I realized like, yeah, so much of that came from this disconnect, and how so much of it is tied to the story we tell ourselves, right? And that became so clear to me that the connection was there, and that this was the right time to talk about that story, and to do it early too. I kind of wanted to set the stage early, so from the moment you read it, it's like, this comes from a very um, like authentic place from the get-go. So yeah, it was almost like evident and obvious for me to include it. And then the hesitance came later after I wrote it, like, ah, should I put it in there or whatever? But in the moment, it just felt very clear to me that these experiences are ones I want to touch on in this book.
One of the things I really liked about your book is you talk about bodies, listening to your body,
Yeah.
kind of intuition, physical wisdom, which is a topic that you haven't covered a ton on More to That. You know, I think you've alluded to running or swimming or exercise. I'd love to like hear more about like what are your physical practices? Do you have like an embodiment practice? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I don't have an embodiment practice. But I do exercise every day, every single day, and I think, you know, I have written about anxiety very extensively, um, and I learned so much through that process of like just looking through anxiety and then trying to tell a story around it that is entertaining with such a daunting topic. And what was so clear to me with that is that the thing with anxiety and the things that a lot of anxiety sufferers feel is that their physiological sensations say something about them as who they are, right? So if they feel like this tightening of the chest, or if they feel like they're this profuse sweating or so forth, like say in a social situation, right? Then the narrative is like, oh shit, like I can't be here. I look like a wreck. I don't know how to talk to people, and I got to get out of here. So they're converting a lot of the physiological sensations to a psychological narrative. And what's wild is that you don't do that for anything else. Like one thing I mentioned is that, like, let's say you had a crazy diarrhea episode, right? You're just like, you know, that poo poo coming out like crazy, and then you don't walk out of there thinking like, oh, damn, I suck, or no one, no one wants to be around me. No, that's just a purely physiological response. But with anxiety, we connect that to some sort of greater story, and so it's very clear that the mind and body are linked, and that wasn't the belief for a lot of time. Like people used to believe in a more dualistic universe where mind and body were separate, but it's becoming more clear that it's not. And I bring up this idea of mind body because I think that it is one of the powerful ways that our inner compass is alerting us of something, of a pull away from what you believe to have conviction in because of expectations that you layer on yourself. And I think that wherever you feel tension, there's generally some sort of tale, like there's a story that you're telling yourself that causes that tension to arise. So yeah, I mean, I don't, with this book, what I really tried to do was like, if let's say there's a spectrum of woo, okay, and then like on one side is like super woo woo, and then on the other side is like super scientific, grounded in neuroscience. I'm not on either pole, right? So I was kind of trying to walk the middle path. So I knew when I was talking about the mind-body connection, I, I'm not gonna pull scientific studies and ground it in that. That's just, and at the same time, I'm not gonna say like, mention all these embodiment exercises and manifestations. Like mine is more so, how do I walk the middle there and still have it feel like it's sensical? And I think that's where I was able to tie it in with the inner compass metaphor. And we all feel it to an extent, right? Like we feel that tension arise in different circumstances when we feel like we're being pulled away from what our convictions are. And I felt like that was a good place to insert that particular idea.
I think I do my best thinking and best reflecting when my body is in motion. You know, you talk about relating, writing, uh, the third thing I'm blanking on, but you talk about kind of different avenues to reflection. Do you think of like moving reflection versus like still body sedentary reflection? Is that a distinction that makes sense?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I think reflection as a form of like kinetic movement is a pretty timeless, age-old piece of wisdom. I mean, ever since, well before Kierkegaard, but there was always this very like heralding of walking, right? Walking was always has been considered a thinker's pastime, really, right? And yeah, I even when I run, I used to put headphones in when I run and listen to stuff, but now I don't, because when I run, I find that a lot of ideas just kind of arise and pop up, and being in motion kind of helps with that. Um, I also think like being in motion doesn't necessarily have to be like your limbs moving, but like you're actually exercising thought to take whatever may be inside and out, right? Like a more release oriented thing. So that's why I mentioned practices like journaling. I think journaling is actually a kinetic release. You're not walking and you're not moving and all that, but you are still sitting, and then you're taking whatever's in there and like spilling it all out, you know? So that is a form of movement. Now, I think if you want to get more literal in terms of body movement, yeah, I mean, I don't go too much into that in the book, but I definitely do think that if you're moving around, and if you're feeling a little like restless, it's good to just get out and move around. I don't know about creating, which is the third principle, while you're moving around. It kind of depends on what you're creating, but that's how I see the connection there.
I think you said your favorite living philosopher is Byung-Chul Han, and maybe I got his name wrong, but what do you like about his work? How has it affected you?
I don't know if he's my favorite, but he is someone that I think is very he's intelligent and he has interesting perspectives. My favorite idea from him is the idea that a capitalist society thrives because it promises freedom to people. But what that causes is people to exploit themselves. So there's this idea with capitalism that like, hey, you have control over your life. You have agency over your life, right? So based upon that, you're free to do what you want and succeed in that way. But when people don't feel like they're succeeding based upon whatever they're conditioned to believe is success, then what they'll end up doing is they have no one to blame but themselves, right? And this is what Byung-Chul Han refers to as a burnout society, where I think that the paradox he was exploring is that why is it that the wealthiest nations in the world tend to have the most depressed people and the most suicidal people and so forth? And he uses South Korea as one of his textbook examples. And I go to Korea every year, and I get to talk to some of the people there, and it's very real, this feeling of restlessness and this feeling that you just have to always be on and working all the time and so forth. And it's because you have no one to blame but yourself. You have no one to blame but yourself. So Byung-Chul Han argues that throughout most of human history, the force that kept you at work was power and repression. So some guy above you making you do something and exerting the power over you. Whereas in the modern world, the force that keeps us chained to work and all that is depression. It's the belief that you're not good enough. The belief that if you're not succeeding based upon some social definition, it's your fault. And you get really down on yourself. So I think that's a really interesting idea that he posited. And I think the way that I've kind of incorporated that into my own life is to just find healthier ways to silence the inner critic, or to be kinder to myself, knowing that that's the dynamic that's happening.
Has the inner compass made you think differently about being a parent?
Yeah, that's a nice question. It's helped me see what my own daughter is like capable of in terms of living a life that's true to your inner compass, right? I mean, she does things based upon a pure curiosity for stuff. And I love it how when she smiles or when she says something, it's so honest. and almost to the point where like it could like break my heart, where it's like, oh, you didn't miss me at all. Yeah, I didn't miss you. And like I'm just like, what? And then other times when she says I missed you out of nowhere, I know she really means it. So there is a sense of just like, yeah, there is this presence that kind of guides her. And at the same time, I could see where the forces of conditioning are coming into her life, right? Like as she goes to school and there are certain friends that say certain things, and then that makes her change her behavior. And I'm like, the conditioning is so strong. It's just so strong, and it also could come from the parents, you know? And so I am more aware now where like if I say something and I'm like, "Hey, this needs to be this way," I think writing this book made me catch that more. Like, "Oh, am I saying this because it's just easier for me if she does things a certain way and I'm conditioning her to do that? Or is it because I really feel like that's aligned with my value system and all that stuff, right?" So it's made me more aware of when I feel like I may be layering my conditioning on her perceptions of the world, and also more aware of when that's happening to her from other sources, and it's much easier to catch. So my wife will sometimes be like, that's conditioning. Like we would just use that word now. Oh, that's conditioning right there. So it's kind of cool because there's like this vocabulary that we could point to when it's like, hey, trying to do something where you're layering on your perceptions on her, or that person's doing that. So it's helped to label that. But I see these things more clear now as a parent, and I don't have it all figured out for sure, but I'm more aware of the dynamics when they're occurring.
Have you gotten any surprising reactions from family members and close friends who know you from the book?
Hmm. It's funny because when you write a book, your closest family members and friends are not the first to give you feedback because I don't even know if they've read it. um, I know that, yeah, I had some I had friends that read it actually, and they actually gave me a compliment without making it so complimentary. Let me explain by that. And it's probably one of the coolest things I heard so far is that my friend we gave the book. I gave the book to him, and I see him and his wife. They're actually a unit that we hang out with me and my wife. And then they told me like months after I gave them the book. I didn't know if they read it or not. They didn't text me or anything. But the next time we got together, they were like, "Oh yeah, we read your book." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, how was it?" And they were like, "Yeah, so he read it first, and then he gave it to his wife and said, 'Hey, this is you should read this.'" And then they went out on a walk together in the woods, and they just talked about the book. They discussed it. And I don't really know what the substance of the discussion was, but the very fact that it prompted a discussion made me, yeah, kind of surprised. Like, oh wow, that's so cool. And I think that is, if there was some sort of goal I was going for, or I'd like as I push this book out, it's that like these kinds of things are happening. And I think with the book, a lot of times it's everything that you don't see. I mean, like what I can see, especially because I'm self-publishing this, is like, oh, I could see how many books were sold, or I could see the ranking and all this stuff. But what I can't see are all the potential conversations that may come out of it, the ways that people are thinking through it. Like these are all things that I have no knowledge of, but are actually the most valuable things. So yeah, and people have told me that they're going to gift it to their kids, and I think that is also up there in terms of like the Mount Everest of compliments, because what that means is that you trust my work to pass it down to the beings that you give your unconditional love to. That's such a big vote of confidence, and that really means a lot. So these kinds of things have been surprising in a very, very nice way, and also just the community really came out to support, as did you, and I'm so thankful for that. And that's just been a very pleasant surprise too.
You wrote the inner compass. You focused on the text first, and you drew kind of later on.
Hmm.
Do you ever flip that for any of your projects? Do you draw first and write the words second?
Yeah, I did that for Travel is No Cure for the Mind, actually, my very first post. I actually drew all the illustrations first. Um, but I'm trying to think. You know what? What I actually might have done. Hmm. Actually, now I kind of forget. It's been a while, but I know that post I wrote out everything hand by hand, and then I have like I put little things for illustrations. But I forget if I did the illustrations first and then the other way. But at at this stage now, though, like if I did do that in the past, I don't do that anymore, and it's mainly because of the fact that if I do that, like the illustrations are so time consuming that if I'm writing it and then I'm like, oh, actually, I don't need this illustration anymore, it's like it's just gone, you know? And it's much more efficient, and it's just kind of to write everything. And the way I work is I write everything and then I just put in brackets as I'm writing, put an illustration in here, and I'll just keep writing and put an illustration in here. So that way I could have all the writing set and then be like, all right, now that this is done, then I could draw. So, and they kind of it's like it uses different parts of my brain. I think with writing, it's like I have to fully be there and think through the ideas. But when I draw, I could put on a podcast, I could put on some comedy thing, and then like just chuckle, laugh, and I just draw. Like it doesn't really require me to think in narratives and all that stuff. So it's a nice kind of bifurcation of the way that I approach my work. And if anything, it kind of adds to that. All right, let's just take a nice little break to do the drawings before you or at the end of the process. So yeah, that's kind of how it works for my creative process.
For people who are thinking about self-publishing, any advice?
It's not that hard. It's not that hard in terms of actually doing it. So here is, if I were to give one piece of advice that's not so tactical, let me first give like some mindset advice, and then I'll do a little bit of tactical. So mindset here, like when it comes to self-publishing, and some people may say, well, do I self-publish or do I traditionally publish? I think self-publishing is great when there is this urgency behind your idea. Like there's like you notice that inspiration has struck and you're just like, all right, I'm ready to go. And you could just go straight into the manuscript, right? That was what it was like for me for the Inner Compass. It was really like a light bulb, like, this topic of knowing myself, like I'm gonna go straight into it. Because if you're gonna go traditionally publish, then it's much slower. It's like you're not gonna go straight into the manuscript. You're gonna sit there and you're gonna write a proposal. And then, like you're gonna get an agent, and then the agent's gonna sell the proposal, and then you have to sign a contract and go through this whole process. So that's like even before you might start writing the book. So I think traditional publishing is great if you want like this kind of slow simmering element to it, and you also want to work with a team on that as well. For the Inner Compass, I was like, this is something I'm just going to do on my own accord because I feel the energy of that, and I want to carry that inspiration out immediately. So if there's an immediacy, just self-publish it. Slow simmer, you could pursue the trad pub. Now, a little more on the tactical stuff with self-publishing. You can write a book, record the audiobook, do all that stuff, format it all on your own. Well, the audiobook I hired an engineer for. The audiobook you should get an engineer. But like, I did not hire an editor. I did not even get a cover designer. I did this all myself. And granted, I have kind of like the skill set because I'm an illustrator and so forth. If you don't have any design background, I think it's good to get a cover designer. But it really is there. Like everything is there. I used Vellum to format, which is a piece of software on the Mac. I used Illustrator for my drawings, and then Amazon KDP to get it up. And I basically did what a publisher would do. I printed out copies, I sent out advanced copies, I sent out some digital advanced copies. I just did it all myself. And I think it's super beneficial to just do it yourself. Just give it a try, see how it feels, and then you'll notice that, oh yeah, I don't need to go traditionally published. Like I don't have to wait around for a traditional publisher to do this. Like I can just do it myself. So don't let that get in the way. If between you and publishing a book, just if you feel it, just do it. All the tools are there. Yeah, I would really encourage people to write books. I think that if writing is an avenue of expressing yourself, doing a book is a great way to just so it's a good way to just challenge yourself. And I think challenging yourself really is the gateway to a lot of cool stuff. So don't let any fears get in the way. Just give it a shot.
I'm inspired by you, and you show me kind of what can be possible. I'm still trying to figure out, the vocation, avocation, art, business, money question.
Yeah.
But you show me that there's a model that works, and sometimes I felt envious and jealous and confused by that. But I root for you fully, and you're the man. You're authentic, you're real, and you should have all the success.
Oh, thank you, thank you. One thing I'll say at the end about envy and like what you just did there was huge in the sense of like you're open to talk about it. I write about envy a lot, and I write about it because it's a struggle, and I think the more you could talk about it, the better it is. But also, like we tend to envy people that we actually have the capacity to be closer to. I think that's one of the reasons why it's such a shitty emotion. Right? You're not gonna envy I don't know Mr. Beast or someone like that, but it's more so the people where you feel like, oh, there might be just a few steps ahead of me. Those are the
Yeah.
people you envy the most, but in reality, they're the people that could be homies,
Yeah.
and you just kind of have to. And that slight reframe does wonders. It's like you're rooting for the person, and as a result, like yeah, like a lot of cool things can happen. Like hopefully this conversation was for you, and
Yeah.
yeah, and a good time chatting with you, man. And I appreciate you, yeah, you being there and supporting. It really means a lot.
Yeah. Thanks, Lawrence. If you're still here, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Definitely make sure to check out Lawrence's book, The Inner Compass. It's excellent, it's short, makes for a great gift. And check out his work at moretothat.com. You can subscribe to my newsletter at thefirejar.com. And if you've made it this far, I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to drop a comment or question below, or reach out directly anytime at hi@thefirejar.com.